Hello everyone and welcome back after the holiday break. We hope that you had a wonderful Christmas and New Year and that you are all doing well. As we begin this new year, we are excited to embark on a journey of learning together. We have a lot of exciting things planned for the coming weeks, and we are confident that with hard work and dedication, we will be able to achieve great things. So, let's get started and let's make this year the best one yet. So, we are the Group 8 and we are going to tackle about thinking, language, and intelligence. I encourage all of you to take down notes because later we will be having a game with a prize of 150 pesos GCash. I'm Fitzgerald Malabanan, together with my group mates Claudette Cabardo, Maria Janicala Ugo, Francesca Laksa, and Kent Seba. But before we start, we have here the learning objectives. First, understand the barriers to problem solving and the significance of finding solution to the problem. Second, understand the meaning of language. Third, determine and language into different cultures. Fourth, understand the meaning of intelligence. Fifth, analyze and evaluate the existing theories of intelligence. And lastly, determine the influences that affect intelligence. We now turn to the subject of how the brains process language, as well as how it uses information to solve problems and make decisions. So first, what is cognitive psychology? It is the branch of psychology that focuses on the study of higher mental processes, including thinking, language, memory, problem solving, knowing, reasoning, judging, and decision making. Although the realm of cognitive psychology is broad, we will center on three major topics. What are you thinking about at this moment? The mere ability to pose such a question underscores the distinctive nature of the human ability to think. No other species contemplates, analyzes, recollects, or plans the way humans do. Understanding what thinking is, however, goes beyond knowing what we think. According to psychologists, thinking is a brain activity in which we mentally manipulate information, including words, visual images, sounds, or other data. Thinking transforms information into new and different forms, allowing us to answer questions, make decisions, solve problems, or make plans. To understand more the fundamental elements involved in thinking, we begin by considering our use of mental images and concepts, the building blocks of thought. To some cognitive psychologists, such mental images constitute a major part of thinking. And mental images are representations in the mind of an object or event. They are not just visual representations. Our ability to hear a tune in our heads also relies on a mental image. In fact, every sensory modality may produce corresponding mental images. Many athletes use mental imagery in their training. Basketball players may try to produce vivid and detailed images of the court, the basket, the ball, and the noisy crowd helping them to improve performance through a process they call getting in the zone. The next one is concepts. Concepts are mental groupings of similar objects, events, or people. Concepts enable us to organize complex phenomena into cognitive categories that are easier to understand and remember. If someone asks you what is in your refrigerator, you might answer with a detailed list of items: a jar of jam, eggs, tomatoes, frozen pork or fish, leftover dishes, bottles of water, etc. Though you may also categorize items in terms of cook or fresh ingredients. Using such categories reflects the operation of concepts. Next up, we have prototypes. Prototypes are typical highly representative examples of a concept that correspond to our mental image or best example of the concept. For instance, although a robin and an ostrich are both examples of birds, the robin is an example that comes to most people's minds far more readily. Consequently, robin is a prototype of the concept bird.
Hi everyone, this is Janica Laugo and will now introduce you to the other elements involved in thinking, which is reasoning. Reasoning. It is a type of mental process that includes rearranging previously known information in order to draw new conclusions. Two kinds of formal reasoning are frequently identified: deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. And one of the most important open questions in reasoning is how these two, deductive and inductive reasoning, are related. First one is the deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is general to specific reasoning. It is a style of reasoning in which, generally speaking, the truth of the input statement or the premises logically assures the truth of the output assertion or the conclusion, given that the reasoning has not been erroneous. Deductive reasoning can also reach new conclusions. One important difference between inductive and deductive reasoning is that deductive reasoning problems can be solved without or despite real-world knowledge. The other major class of reasoning is inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is specific to general reasoning. This type of data-driven reasoning involves gathering information and fusing it with other data to arrive at a conclusion. Inductive reasoning is ubiquitous in human thinking. Drawing an analogy, generalizing based on a well-known example, and drawing an inductive conclusion from a specific premise are all examples of inductive reasoning. Both inductive and deductive reasoning are subject to certain restrictions, some of which are derived from real-world knowledge, which can both help and hinder the effectiveness of reasoning. If we consistently use deductive and inductive reasoning, we would make decisions and solve problems quite logically.
You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to practice your powers of deductive reasoning. Or would that be inductive reasoning? Deductive, inductive. What's the difference? Deductive reasoning starts out with a hypothesis and examines the possibilities to reach a specific logical conclusion. For example, spiders have 8 legs. A black widow is a spider. Therefore, a black widow has 8 legs. Think of it as a mathematical equation. A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. For deductive reasoning to work, the hypothesis must be correct. It's assumed that the premises, spiders have 8 legs, and a black widow is a spider, are true. So the conclusion is logical and true, because in deductive reasoning, if something's true of a group of things in general, it's also true for all members of that group. However, even if the generalization is not true, it's possible to come to a conclusion that sounds logical, but may also be incorrect. If I say all spiders eat fish, a black widow is a spider, therefore black widows eat fish. It's valid logically, but it's untrue, because the original statement is false. Inductive reasoning, on the other hand, makes broad generalizations from specific observations. There's data, then conclusions are drawn from the data. Here's how it works. A coin that I pulled from this bag is a penny. A second coin is a penny. A third coin is also a penny. Therefore, all the coins in the bag are pennies. But inductive reasoning allows for a conclusion to be false even if the premises are true. For example, cobras are venomous. Cobras are snakes. Therefore, all snakes are venomous. Inductive reasoning may not always produce a true conclusion, but scientists can use it to produce hypotheses to investigate, and they use deductive reasoning to apply the hypotheses to answer specific questions about science. Deductive and inductive reasoning.
Algorithms. Algorithms pervade our lives. Sometimes we see it and sometimes we don't, but they significantly influence the choices we make. An algorithm is a formula for solving problems that gives you step-by-step instructions used to achieve the desired outcome. If applied appropriately, it ensures a solution to a problem. Heuristics. Thinking process that may help us come up with a solution to a problem or make a choice, but can occasionally result in inaccuracies. These rule of thumb techniques speed up decision making and enable people to carry out their task without constantly pausing to consider their next course of action. Heuristics can be useful in many circumstances, but they can also result in cognitive biases. Knowing this might enable you to make more sensible and reliable decisions. There are 2 types of heuristics. The first one is availability heuristics. Availability heuristics frequently assist people in problem solving and decision making, but some may result in incorrect conclusions. The availability heuristics allows people to quickly arrive at a conclusion, faced with the need for an immediate decision. When you are trying to decide, a lot of connected incidents or circumstances could pop into your head right away. You can conclude that some events are more common or likely than others as a result. You tend to exaggerate the possibility and probability of similar situations happening in the future by giving this information more weight. And the second one is familiarity heuristics. Familiarity heuristics is based on using schemas or past action as a scaffold for behavior in a new yet familiar context. This is advantageous since it saves the subject's time when determining how to act in a circumstance that they have already encountered. When a circumstance comparable to the one at hand emerges, people naturally think that their prior behavior would produce the same effects. Generally speaking, this method is helpful. However, in situations that are different from those in the past, some behaviors may be improper. Although heuristics often help people solve problems and make decisions, certain kinds of heuristic may lead to inaccurate conclusions. Cognitive psychologists are interested in understanding how people solve complex, real-life problems. Psychologists have found that problem solving typically involves three steps: preparation, production, and judgment. First step is preparation, or understanding and diagnosing problems. Typically, a problem falls into one of the three categories. First category is arrangement problems. People are asked to arrange a set of things in a way that meets a set of criteria after being given the objects. Second category is problems of inducing a structure. There are some things provided that are related to one another in some way. The subject is questioned about this relationship. And the third category is transformation problems. There is an initial state, a set of legal actions that modify the state, and a goal state in transformational problems. Whether the problem is one of arrangement, inducing structure, or transformation, the preparation stage of understanding and diagnosing is critical in problem solving because it allows us to develop our own cognitive representation of the problem and to place it within a personal framework. We may divide the problem into subparts or ignore some information as we try to simplify the task. Winnowing out non-essential information is often a critical step in the preparation stage of problem solving. After preparation, the next stage in problem solving is the production of possible solutions. Under this is forming sub-goals. The establishment of sub-goals or the necessary intermediate steps to solve a problem is another strategy. With this heuristic approach, the goal must be taken into account. The steps required to solve the problem must be conceptualized, and the stages closest to the goal must be completed first. And the insight sudden awareness. Insight is the sudden perception of the relationship between the components of a problem. For instance, you might suddenly conceive of the word that will fill all the blanks in a crossword puzzle. The final stage in problem solving is judging the adequacy of a solution. Often this is a simple matter. If the solution is clear, we will know immediately whether we have been successful. If the solution is less concrete, or if there is no single correct solution, evaluating solutions becomes more difficult. In such instances, we must decide which alternative solution is best. Unfortunately, we often quite inaccurately estimate the quality of our own ideas. However, as we see next, several kinds of obstacles to and biases in problem solving affect the quality of the decision and judgments we make. Functional fixedness is the propensity to see something or do something in just one manner, such as viewing mathematics as a topic to be feared rather than as one that merely requires the acquisition of rules in order to answer issues and is essential to professional advancement. Mental set. A tendency to tackle things in a particular way might be beneficial or detrimental depending on the situation. For instance, the schedule of finishing all schoolwork before viewing evening television may be more likely to produce academic success than the schedule of TV or study. And the confirmation bias, focusing on information that supports your pre-existing beliefs. Confirmation bias occurs for several reasons. For one thing, because rethinking a problem that appears to be solved already takes extra cognitive effort, we are apt to stick with our first solution. For another, we give greater weight to subsequent information that supports our initial position than to information that is not supportive of it. Creativity and problem solving. Despite obstacles to problem solving, many people adeptly discover creative solutions to problems. One enduring question that cognitive psychologists have sought to answer is what factors underlie creativity, the ability to generate original ideas or solve problems in novel ways. Highly creative individuals show divergent thinking, thinking that generates unusual, yet appropriate, responses to problems or questions. This type of thinking contrasts with convergent thinking, which is thinking in which a problem is viewed as having a single answer and which produces responses that are based primarily on knowledge and logic. Another aspect of creativity is its cognitive complexity, or preference for elaborate, intricate, and complex stimuli and thinking patterns.
Hello, again my name is Fitzgerald Malabanan, and now we are going to tackle about language. So language is the communication of information through symbols arranged according to systematic rules. And without language, our ability to transmit information, acquire knowledge, and cooperate with others would be tremendously hindered. The basic structure of language rests on grammar. So grammar, it is the system of rules that determine how our thoughts can be expressed. It deals with three major components of language, which is phonology, syntax, and semantics. The first one is phonology. It is the study of the smallest units of speech called phonemes. And phonemes is the smallest unit of speech that affect meaning and of the way we use those sounds to form words and produce meaning. Example of this is the A sound in the word fat and the A sound in the word fate represent two different phonemes in English. The second one is syntax. Refers to the rules that indicate how words and phrases can be combined to form sentences. It is also the rules that guide the order in which words may be strung together to communicate meaning. Example, consider the changes in meaning caused by the different word orders in the following three utterances. John kidnapped the boy, John the kidnapped boy, and the boy kidnapped John. The last one is semantics. It is the meanings of words and sentences. Semantic rules allow us to use words to convey the subtle nuances in meaning. Example, we might say a truck hit Laura, and we can also say Laura was hit by a truck in other circumstances.
Good morning, psychmates! I am Francesca Maxine N. Laksa, and today I will be speaking about language and everything that we need to know about it. When we hear the word language, we often vary our descriptions associated with dialect, grammar, communication, and vocabulary. As you can see on the current slide, it says here that if children are not exposed to language during this critical period, later they will have great difficulty overcoming this deficit. Now what does this mean? It means that in developing one's skills, exposure and proper utilization of a child's vocabulary is necessary, because some theorists argue that a critical period exists for a language development early in life, in which a child is particularly sensitive to language cues and most easily acquires language. Production of language. With the environment of a 1-year-old baby, they stop producing sounds that are not in the language to which they have been exposed. This means that this is the turning point of expanding the language development of a child. This is the start where children adapt to the environment that they live in, their language, their accent, their word usage, and etc. And then eventually, a child can now produce several words in building their sentences. And as children get older, they use less telegraphic speech in expressing their thoughts. Instead of saying, "Mommy, I want milk," they would say, "Mommy, milk." And as months go by, they will start to be more flexible in engaging with other people. In understanding language acquisition, psychologists have offered 3 major explanations, one based on learning theory, one based on innate processes, and one that involves a combination of the two. The first one is the learning theory approaches, which basically treat language as a learned skill. Example is when a child who often finds her mother through saying "mommy" will always receive a warm hug and a nice sway. This scenario will imply that a child saying "mama" or "mommy" is a child receiving love through it. Being rewarded by his mother will teach a kid to make this sound more often. Second is the nativist approach, which considers language as an innate skill. This approach suggests that we're born with a specific language learning area in our brain. Nativists believe that children are wired to learn language, regardless of their environment. It means that they master and construct their thoughts and information appropriately. Last is the interactionist approach. It suggests that the brain is hardwired for our acquisition of language. The interactionist approach claims that if our language ability develops out of a desire to communicate, then language is dependent upon whom we want to communicate with. This means that the environment you grow up in will heavily affect how well and how quickly you learn to talk. For example, when a child and an adult engage in conversation, the adult establishes their power by claiming knowledge and authority that the child cannot. Linguistic relativity hypothesis. According to this view, language provides us with categories that we use to construct our view of others and events in the world around us. For example, different words mean various things in other languages. Not every word in all languages has an exact one-to-one translation in a foreign language. Because of these small but crucial differences, using the wrong word within a particular language can have significant consequences. Example is how sexist language influences the way in which our society views men and women. For instance, we use words such as fireman, policeman to identify a person. To psychologists, intelligence is the capacity to understand the world, think rationally, and use resources effectively when faced with challenges. This definition does not lay to rest a key question asked by psychologists: is intelligence a unitary attribute, or are there different kinds of intelligence? We turn now to various theories of intelligence that address the issue. Here we have the 4 theories of intelligence: the G factor, fluid and crystallized intelligence, Gardner's multiple intelligences, the many ways of showing intelligence, and Sternberg's triarchic theory. The first one is the G factor. This general intelligence factor was thought to underlie performance in every aspect of intelligence, and it was the G factor that was presumably being measured in tests of intelligence. It refers to a general mental ability that underlies multiple specific skills, including verbal, spatial, numerical, and mechanical. For example, researchers might find that people who score well on questions that measure vocabulary also perform better on questions related to reading comprehension. Next one is fluid and crystallized intelligence. Crystallized intelligence is the accumulation of information, knowledge, and skills that people have learned through experience and education. It reflects our ability to call up information from a long-term memory. For example, when taking a psychology exam, you might need to rely on fluid intelligence to come up with a strategy to solve a statistics problem, while you must also employ crystallized intelligence to recall the exact formula you need to use. It is because fluid intelligence refers to abilities needed for abstract reasoning and speeded performance, whereas crystallized intelligence refers to knowledge acquired through one's culture, including verbal ability and social knowledge. The third theory of intelligence is Gardner's multiple intelligences. Psychologist Gardner has taken an approach very different from traditional thinking about intelligence. Gardner argues that rather than asking, "How smart are you?" we should be asking a different question: "How are you smart?" Gardner argues that we have a minimum 8 different forms of intelligence, each relatively independent of the others: musical, bodily kinesthetic, logical mathematical, linguistic, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalist. In Gardner's view, each of the multiple intelligence is linked to an independent system in the brain. And the last one is Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence. Robert Sternberg attempted to go beyond this view by proposing a triarchic theory that deals with the 3 aspects of intelligence. 1. Cognitive processes. 2. Identifying situations that require intelligence. And 3. Using intelligence in the external world. He tried to analyze the cognitive processes into smaller components. This theory is efficient and effective in assessing teaching methods because it suggests that intelligence results from information processing components being applied to experience for the purpose of adaptation to, shaping of, and selection of environments. Meaning, we all have different forms of intelligence because we all had different paths and discovering them. Assessing intelligence. Psychologists who study intelligence have focused much of their attention on the development of intelligence tests that quantify a person's level of intelligence. These tests have proved to be of great benefit in identifying students in need of special attention in school, diagnosing specific learning difficulties, and helping people make the best educational and vocational choices. At the same time, their use has proved controversial, raising important social and educational issues.
Alfred Binet was a French psychologist best remembered for developing the first widely used intelligence test. The test originated after the French government commissioned Binet to develop an instrument that could identify school kids that needed remedial studies. With his collaborator Theodore Simon, they created the Binet-Simon Intelligence Scale. 1. Louis Terman later revised the scale and standardized the test with subjects drawn from an American sample, and the test became known as the Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale. The test is still in use today and remains one of the most widely used intelligence tests. 2. Best known for Binet-Simon Intelligence Scale 1 Stanford Binet IQ Test. Early life. Alfred Binet was born Alfredo Binetti on July 8, 1857, in Nice, France. His father, a physician, and his mother, an artist, divorced when he was young, and Binet then moved to Paris with his mother. After graduating from law school in 1878, Binet initially planned to follow in his father's footsteps and enroll in medical school. He began to study science at Sorbonne but soon began educating himself in psychology by reading works by individuals such as Charles Darwin and John Stuart Mill. Career Binet began working at the Salpêtrière Hospital in Paris under the guidance of Jean-Martin Charcot. Afterward, he moved to a position at the Laboratory of Experimental Psychology where he was the associate director and researcher. In 1894, Binet was appointed the director of the lab and he remained in this position until his death in 1911. Binet's early support of Charcot's research on hypnotism resulted in professional embarrassment when Charcot's ideas faltered under closer scientific evaluation. He soon turned his interest toward the study of development and intelligence, often basing his research on observations of his two daughters. While Alfred Binet's interests were broad and quite diverse, he is most famously known for his work on the topic of intelligence. Binet was asked by the French government to develop a test to identify students with learning disabilities or who required special help in school. Binet's intelligence test. Binet and colleague Theodore Simon developed a series of tests designed to assess mental abilities. Rather than focus on learned information such as math and reading, Binet instead concentrated on other mental abilities such as attention and memory. The scale they developed became known as the Binet-Simon Intelligence Scale. The test was later revised by psychologist Louis Terman and became known as the Stanford-Binet. While Binet's original intent was to use the test to identify children who needed additional academic assistance, the test soon became a means to identify those deemed feeble-minded by the eugenics movement. Eugenics was the now debunked belief that the human population could be genetically improved by controlling who was allowed to have children. By doing this, the eugenicists believed they could produce more desirable inherited characteristics. This shift in how the test was used is notable since Binet himself believed that the intelligence test he had designed had limitations. He believed that intelligence was complex and could not be fully captured by a single quantitative measure. He also believed that intelligence was not fixed. Perhaps most importantly, Binet also felt that such measures of intelligence were not always generalizable and could only apply to children with similar backgrounds and experiences. Alfred Binet's contributions to psychology today. Alfred Binet is often cited as one of the most influential psychologists in history. While his intelligence scale serves as the basis for modern intelligence tests, Binet himself did not believe that his test measured a permanent or inborn degree of intelligence. According to Binet, an individual's score can vary. He also suggested that factors such as motivation and other variables can play a role in test scores. Selected publications. Binet, A. 1916. New Methods for the Diagnosis of the Intellectual Level of Subnormals. In E. S. Kite, Trans, The Development of Intelligence in Children. Vineland, N.J., Publications of the Training School at Vineland. Originally published 1905 in L'Année Psychologique, 12, 191-244. Binet. A. and Simon, T. 1916. The Development of Intelligence in Children. Baltimore, Williams and Wilkins. Reprinted 1973, New York, Arno Press, 1983, Salem, N.H., Air Company. In his own words, some recent philosophers seem to have given their moral approval to these deplorable verdicts that affirm that the intelligence of an individual is a fixed quantity, a quantity that cannot be augmented. We must protest and react against this brutal pessimism. We will try to demonstrate that it is founded on nothing. Alfred Binet, Les Idées modernes sur les enfants, 1909.